Next we had The Phone Box at the Edge of the World by... Oh my god. Hello, welcome to another video. This is going to be a very short January wrap-up video. The reason it is short is, one, because I've already done a lot of videos, seeing as I said I wasn't going to do a lot. And two, I am not always very good at articulating myself vocally, and I will just end up waffling, so I'm going to try and make this short. So let's get started. So my first book of the month was We Are Called to Rise by Laura McBride. I've had this years, and yeah, it was good. I gave it 4 stars. It's not a collection of short stories, but it has a very similar vibe because it's basically 5 characters, all who have their own chapters which bleed in and out of each other's, but they're all vaguely set in the same place. A lot of it is in Las Vegas, with a couple of excursions elsewhere. But yeah, generally overall it was very good, quite raw and compelling, and I love books about the human condition, so yeah, I enjoyed this. Next up we have Dear Senthuran by Akwaeke Emezi. I have read Pet and The Death of Vivek OG by Akwaeke Emezi, and I adore them both, especially Vivek OG. That was one of my top reads of 2021. It's only a little book and it didn't take me too long to read. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and I think mainly it was just because memoirs can often be quite personal, and I think this definitely was an example of that. And I think the way that they were trying to tell their story was perhaps just a little bit too messy for a reader who doesn't know their life or know their friends or know them personally to understand and connect with. So I don't think it was a bad book by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, like I said, Akwaeke Emezi is a fantastic writer, so I really enjoyed that, but I think perhaps it was just hard to understand the stream of consciousness and narration and yeah, connect with this book. But I wouldn't recommend it. Just going into it, I think perhaps understand that it's not kind of a conventional memoir. Then we have Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano. This I've seen around a lot, and the premise is pretty bleak. It's about a boy who is in a plane crash and he is the only survivor. His whole family dies on the plane, his brother and his parents, and so he ends up living with his aunt and uncle. It's a very compelling read, and what I loved about it, what I said in my review, was that the author chose to write this book from a child's perspective, and I think there's something so refreshing about seeing life sometimes from the perspective of a child, because they're often not encumbered by the prejudices that we are, or the just the perspective that as adults we kind of end up having, because we're all pretty pessimistic and fed up with life, and I think, yeah, often children haven't quite reached that part yet. And I think so Edward's perspective and his friend, what was her name? Shay. Yeah, I really enjoyed their relationship and just the way they saw the world. So yeah, I would really recommend that one. I gave that one 4 stars. And also, should have said this at the beginning, I have reviewed most of these books and I will leave the reviews to my blog. All of my reviews are spoiler free, so you can read them and you won't be spoilt. But yeah, if you want a more in-depth look at any of the books from my point of view, then you can head over to my blog and read them there. Next we have The Phone Box at the Edge of the World by Laura and Mai Messina. This was the pick for January for my book club, and it's translated from Italian and it's set in Japan, and it's basically about a real life phone box that's actually in Japan, where people who have experienced grief can go and speak to their dead loved ones, essentially. And it revolves around Yu, who lost her mother and daughter in the 2011 tsunami, and it's basically her story of grief but also rebuilding her life after that loss. I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it, I liked the story, and actually having had the discussion with my book club, I think I might bump it up to at least 3.5 if not 4, because having heard their descriptions of it and their analysis, it actually compelled me to like the book a bit more. The reason I gave it 3 stars is because there's not much plot to get your teeth sunk into. It's pretty whimsical. Half of it is the narrative and the plot, and then the other half is this digression, which will often be things like Bible passages or recipes or a list, random things like that. So it kind of, it's hard to stay grounded, and often I found myself a little bit lost. So overall I did really like the book, but I think because I couldn't really get my teeth sunk into it and really feel gripped to the storyline, that's why I didn't love it. However, I don't think it's a bad book, so if it has piqued your interest, then read it, go ahead. Next we have The Bookshop of the Broken Hearted by Robert Hillman. This is set in Australia, post World War II, concerns two people, one of whom was in a concentration camp during World War II and lost her family, and she ends up in Australia and she meets a man there, and she has set up a bookshop, and she basically starts a relationship with him, and together they build the bookshop, and it's about her story and his story basically. I gave this one 3 stars. Unlike The Phone Box at the Edge of the World, I wouldn't recommend it. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. Frankly, I just didn't care. I often find myself not liking books if I don't have any investment in the character's storyline. I want to at least like someone, or at least hate them enough to feel something, but mostly I just felt indifferent, which is a real shame. So yeah, overall wasn't a fan of this one. Then we have Beach Read by Emily Henry. This was my only 5-star book of the month. And I love this one, so much so that I put it in the poll for my book club's pick in February. My book club choose which book we're going to read, but out of a list that I put together, this was one of them, and they actually chose this one for our February read. Yay! So I think this would be perfect for a February book, because obviously it's Valentine's Day and this is a slushy romance, and I love me a romance. Yeah, this concerns 2 writers, January and Gus, and they are in cabins next door to each other, and they are both writers, but they are both suffering from writer's block, and both of them need to write a book. So obviously they help each other write the book, fall in love along the way. It's a bit more complicated than that. I liked that it was layered. There's a lot about grief, about losing loved ones, about growing up past the time where you thought you needed to grow up, exploring, yeah, all of those different themes, and so I really liked it. I like the way that Emily Henry wrote the characters generally, and I just really liked her writing, so I'm looking forward to reading more from her. Then we have The Blue Between Sky and Water by Susan Abawala. This is another book that I've seen all over Instagram. It is set in Palestine. I enjoyed it, but to be honest, I'm not going to give much of an in-depth review. I didn't review this one on my blog just because I don't have enough knowledge about the situation in Palestine to really be able to write a coherent and informed review of it, so it's not really my place to say. It was very well written, it was very heartfelt and compelling, and there are moments in it which are really dark and horrible, but there's also small moments of joy and hope as well, and I do like that when books have that juxtaposition, because it makes you sort of savour the good parts. So yeah, I'd be interested in reading more from this author, but this is one that I really would like to discuss with other people, so if you have read it, let me know and we can chat. Then my penultimate read of the month was Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis Benn. This is set in Jamaica, and is a sort of coming of age story surrounding 2 sisters. I always forget everybody's names as soon as I put the books down. Tandy and Margot. And yeah, I sort of say it's coming of age, somewhat coming of age, because Tandy is young but Margot is older, so she's sort of already come of age. But it's a very similar atmosphere and narrative to The Girl with the Louding Voice, if anybody has read that, in that there are moments that are pretty brutal and heartbreaking and raw, but there's also a lot in there which is joyful and is a good snapshot of their life in Jamaica. I really enjoyed the book because it felt very atmospheric, it felt very immersive. I could get lost in it quite easily, and I think as an audiobook this would be really good, so I may at some point reread it in that format. And finally we have Sapiens. I did a reading vlog on this, so I don't need to say much, but overall I really enjoyed it. Very informative, fascinating, made me think a lot about things, and I am excited to read the other book in this series, Homo Deus. That is all. That was just a little overview of all the books I've read this month, or last month because it's now February, and I will try and do the same every month so you can just get a bit of an idea for what I've been reading. Like I said, overall I only rated one of those 5 stars, but there are quite a lot in there I would recommend. And yeah, let me know what you've been reading this month if you've got any recommendations. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!